Welcome to part 2 of the training videos on the KWIZ List Aggregator app. In this second video, I will show you how the app is used to connect to and aggregate data from multiple SharePoint lists. I will take the example of SharePoint task lists. I will demonstrate aggregating data from multiple subsites and then also aggregating data from multiple site collections. Here is my SharePoint site with the list aggregator already connected to multiple SharePoint task lists. The groups control has been used to group the data by status. The data in the app is being aggregated from task lists in 3 subsites. The sites are called Project A, Project B, and Project C. I will now show you how the list aggregator is configured to connect to these lists. Firstly, I need to add the list aggregator web part to the page. I then need to edit the settings and choose the data source of SharePoint List Aggregator. There are a number of options to control how the data is presented. However, first I need to configure the web part to connect to certain sites as a data source. This is done using the Add Data Source option. This will open a Configure Data Source screen. Firstly, I provide my data source with a name. Then I select if I want to return data from the entire site collection or just certain elements. I will choose site collection, as in my case I want to return task list from multiple sites. I then need to specify the starting site to use for the data source. What you enter here will depend on the scope set above. For example, if you choose specific site, then you want to enter the URL of that site. As all of my task lists are in this site collection, the current site is fine. There are a number of ways to identify the lists to aggregate. Firstly, it could be a pattern in the site URL or list title. This would be useful if you wanted to connect to certain sites or custom lists. You can also choose to connect to one or more list types from the standard set of types. For instance, I could choose tasks and events. There is also the option to return only data from certain content types. To include the data source in my web part, I need to set it to enabled. You will notice that my web part is not yet showing any data. This is because I have not defined the query definition. This is the query which should be used to retrieve the data from the data sources. It defines what columns should be displayed and any filter to be applied. I need to provide a site and list to configure the query definition. This can be any of the lists used in my data source. There are other options available here. These include using a list view in the query. This would be useful if I wanted only certain items returned, for example, completed tasks. I can also set the maximum number of items to return and the maximum number of items per list. You can see that the data is returned aggregated from my 3 task lists. As there is more than 10 items, the paging control also displays. As demonstrated in other training videos, I can easily change how the data is presented using the Lego style UI. For example, I can remove the paging control and add a groups control. I am not limited to aggregating data from one site collection. I will demonstrate how I can use the List Aggregator app to connect the data from 2 different site collections. They are called Project 1 and Project 2. They each contain a task list. In the web part, I once again choose SharePoint List Aggregator as the data source type. I need to add a data source for each of the site collections. Specifying the URL for each of the site collections. I repeat the process for each site collection I want to include. Once again, I need to provide one of the task lists as a definition for the query of the data. It is that simple to connect the List Aggregator app to task lists in 2 different site collections. In this training video, I showed you how the List Aggregator app can be configured to aggregate data from multiple different task lists, whether those lists are in subsites or different site collections. Thank you for watching this training video. If you need any further information, please contact QuizCom using the details on screen.